So hello everyone, I'm Pietro, and together with Alex, we're excited to share our project on Euro 2024, more specifically what statistical or tactical traits separated the overperformers at Euro 2024. And so our core question was always centered around finding some specific tactical choices that overperformers adopted that defined their success at this tournament.
Yeah, and speaking of our method in particular, we used Google Colab as a resource to access StatsBomb open soccer data via Python coding language. And we used Streamlit to visualize make some of the visualizations that are utilized in this presentation. Based on sort of the media and the public perception, we identified two different groups of over and underperformers based on their performance in the group stages, which we used those games for consistency because certain teams made it further than others in the tournament itself. And the four identified links that we examined were the height of the defensive line and the number of pressures, the verticality in possession, each group's set piece efficiency and corner kick taking strategy, and their width in building up play.
So our first focus was the defensive approach, specifically the height of the defensive lines and the number of total pressures. So our initial hypothesis was pretty simple. We thought that the better teams would press more and press higher up the pitch. And so to check this, we looked at the average field position of every press, which we found on StatsBomb because they basically look at a pitch on a scale from 0 to 120 units, and they record the coordinates of every pressure. And so the X pressure would be the height of the pressure then. And then we also tallied up the total quantity of pressures, blocks, and clearances. And so contrary to our hypothesis, actually the overperformers adopted a deeper defensive line. However, they did have a higher number of total pressures as well as a higher total number of blocks and clearances. And this probably indicates that their lower block made them more compact and allowed them to be hard to break down. And so in conclusion, success wasn't really tied to just pressing up and being high, but just being compact and knowing when to press in the right moments. And then our second analysis was about ball progression, specifically vertical and possession. So we wanted to check whether the tactical style of being vertical and direct was better than having a more possession patient build up. And so the relevant metrics we looked at were these ones, and basically they're all around either passing and just the verticality in it. And so what we found is that surprisingly, the overperformers had less passes, but even more surprisingly, they had a lower pass completion. However, they had a higher average pass length as well as higher forward to backward pass ratio. And so this tells us something important, that these teams weren't just obsessed with keeping the ball, but they were really proactive in trying to progress the ball forward, while the underperformers were too busy trying to be safe and not lose the ball, which obviously will lead to better passing stats with a better pass completion, but is ultimately the losing strategy.
And both of these analyses, particularly, we felt like told a story about the team's midfield, that they were super aggressive in winning the ball in a sort of compact engine and shooting it out directly out to the forward. So I'll get to that in a second. But first, as a kind of a segue, our third analysis was on quarter kicks. And honestly, this was more open-ended. We collected every corner kick taken by our 6 teams, and we said, let's look at how many players were in the box, where the ball was sent near our far post, and see if we can identify any sort of commonalities that said, okay, this strategy was a unanimous, effective approach that the overperformers found. And it kind of just became a trend throughout the rest of the tournament. And so we found that a key differentiator was actually success at the far post. For both groups, the over and underperformers, it was the least focused on post. They tended to focus on the near central post, but the efficiency on it's a huge difference between the over and underperformers. This average XG indicates the quality of the shot, basically. And a difference between 0.25 and 0.02 is extremely significant when you think about the playing on the margins and getting a little advantage from your set pieces. So that really stood out to us. But then another one was the fact that overperformers had more unique corner kick takers, as shown above there. The bottom 3 teams are the overperformers, and they had different players taking corner kicks in general. And so that indicates that that variety was super useful. And it maybe also indicates that they had designed plays that relied on different players taking that set piece. And so maybe that just indicates that they prepared for it better in general. And these metrics below are just stats that show their success, basically. And then our fourth one was a focus on width, and just through watching the tournament, we both agreed that Spain's wingers, Lamine Yamal and Nico Williams, were like a huge defining factor in their winning the tournament. And I think we also thought that Spain's past tournaments, they never really had sort of like those iconic wingers. So maybe that was just a swing in their approach as a nation. And we wondered basically if all the other overperformers kind of found that as a trend and really got the wingers the ball quicker, and instead of that sort of patient buildup that Pietro was talking about. And so we focused on these four measures to identify how quickly the ball was sprayed out to the wings, how involved the fullbacks were, if they were pushing up the pitch as well, and just sort of the structure of their width as well with the final stat there. And we found that the overperformers quite shockingly involved the fullbacks more frequently, utilizing the zones 5 and 8 more, which are the two left and right flanks. They also had a much higher quantity actually of switch passes, which indicate wider patterns of play and spraying the ball out to either side. Probably they could possibly be from the midfield to the wingers, or it could be all the way across, but either way indicates that the ball was out there quite a bit longer. And yes, this stat here indicates that players, the wingers in particular, held their position out wide quite a bit more and picked up the ball quicker. The less rotations show that they were more stable in their natural roles instead of like drifting central, which inherently suggests that they were wider in itself. And so this is sort of an original metric that we coded through Python to get to that result. And so these four analyses all together, we thought actually told quite an interesting story on what like the sort of summarizing tactical approach of the four overperformers were. We figured they had a deep block, and the midfielders were actually maybe sort of what you call engines, just sweeping the ball up and spraying it out, as opposed to like controlling the ball and passing it back and forth in the middle. They just picked up the ball deep with their deep defensive block and sprayed it out to those wingers and got that motion quickly going. We also, of course, found that they were more effective from corner kicks because they got more through playing out wide, and also that they were more effective in their play in that regard. They relied on zone 14 less, which is in the central space right outside of the 18-yard box. And so that indicates that the generation of chances came from the flanks more than sort of the traditional or alternative attacking midfielder playing will through balls for the striker. So it's like completely contrasting type of tactics. That's it.